Jennifer, what's going on? You are in the midst of how many hours of fasting now are you in?
I don't hours. I'm on my third day. Last meal was Sunday night at 5 o'clock. So
Okay. So you're like 60 something hours in.
yeah.
And I'm approaching, I'm at 71 hours in. But the longest fast you did before this one was what?
20, well, maybe about 36 hours before I had a colonoscopy. It was the longest I've ever done.
It was forced on you that time.
Yeah, that
but
was forced on me, and I had to drink all that horrible stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know that would actually really even count.
I was gonna say we'll count it, but what is the longest purposeful you ever did before this one?
24 hours. Dinner to
24 hours.
dinner. Yeah, dinner to dinner.
I'm so proud of you. I said, just make it to our interview, and when you come on the air, I will make sure you made it. So, you think you're going to go a whole week?
Yeah, I'm going to try for sure. I ended up coming up to our cabin here in Montana. We needed to close it up for the winter, and that's where I am now, and it's at almost 7,000 feet. And so I actually am really feeling the altitude this morning, I think. And I'm thinking, oh, I didn't compute altitude with fasting, might not have been the best idea. So I'm kind of feeling it.
Because you already feel kind of floaty when you fast anyway.
I'm feeling shaky and woozy a little bit this morning.
Yeah.
Normal.
Give
Okay.
yourself, if you need to end it, that's normal. Oh, I just noticed I blurred my background. Let me unblur the background. Hi, background. You ever make mistakes? Do you ever make mistakes like that where you're like, oh, I didn't mean to put that little thing in there, that little,
yeah.
Yes. So guys, this is my friend Jennifer. Is it Isenhart or Isenhart?
It's Isenhart.
Isenhart. So yeah. Jennifer Isenhart, you may not know her name, but I'm sure you've been exposed to her work because she did a wonderful documentary film. She was crazy enough to release it in the year of the pandemic.
That was not planned.
Yeah, exactly. It's called Fat Fiction. And if you haven't seen it, go check her out. She's over on Instagram, Wide Eye TV over on Instagram. And it's currently available in a lot of different places. So Wide Eye Production, that's your production company?
That's the production company that I own with my husband, yeah.
So you make documentary films for a living. Fat Fiction kind of made a splash last year, despite the pandemic. Well, it was actually pretty good because people were looking for content to watch because, everybody was Netflixing and chilling. And but you got on all the platforms, Amazon Video? What are all the platforms currently?
Yeah, it's on Amazon, it's on Vimeo, it's on Tubi TV, which is a streaming platform. It's on Google Play and YouTube Rentals are all the main ones. Yeah.
So out there, guys, go look up Fat Fiction. You'll find it on one of those platforms. And I remember I was a part of one of your premieres when it came out last year. You had like a group of people that did this premiere online because that's what we did last year. Yeah. And then had people, lots of my friends in the community that were in this film. But let's back up a little bit because you're a filmmaker, you're a documentary maker, you have ideas that you're passionate about. You're obviously interested in nutrition, and this week, not nutrition, eating no food. Tell us about that journey. What made you want to kind of look at the role dietary fat and I guess to the same degree ketogenic diets play in people's health?
Yeah, I think I just kind of fell into it, really. I had my own personal interest in nutrition. I guess I've always been kind of interested in nutrition. I worked in television news for a lot of years before we started our own company. And so I was a special projects producer and I did series and stuff like that for a television station. And did, several stories, nutrition stories, interviewing nutritionists and dietitians. And I just, remember over the years being told again and again how bad saturated fat was and how it should be avoided at all costs and that we should switch to vegetable oil spreads and, I can't believe it's not butter kind of stuff is much better for us. Yeah.
I can't. I can't believe it's not butter.
Yeah. And so, I'd been indoctrinated into the so-called low-fat, paradigm in my career by experts that I had interviewed. And but I myself personally was still struggling with just, upset digestion, kind of bloaty. I knew I always had trouble with sugar. I knew when I ate sugar, even as a kid, if I ate sugar, I would have these, huge drops, these reactive hypoglycemic episodes, and I would kind of get the shakes. And in fact, it was thought when I was a kid that I may have diabetes, and I had to do the panel, the blood glucose tolerance test, and I wasn't diabetic, but I just was very sensitive to sugar. So it was about 3 years ago I took a sugar detox course. It was a 5-week course, and I got completely off of sugar. And it was the first night of that class. They said, not only do you need to eliminate sugar, but you need to bump up your fat, eat a lot more fat, including saturated fat. And it shocked me really. And I was like, wait a minute, I don't know if this is right. And so I did it though, because I'm like, I'm going to try this experiment and see how I feel. And I felt fabulous. I felt the best I've felt in years after doing that for 5 weeks.
It's like the Matrix. It's like taking the red pill and you go, wait a minute. Everything that's up is down. Everything that's left is right. It's like, what? Yeah. Like literally everything we thought we knew about nutrition pretty much turned on its head. I remember South Park actually did an episode where they turned the food pyramid upside down. Oh, we've turned it the wrong way. It's supposed to be this way.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because it's true. I remember I got to testify before the Dietary Guidelines Committee back in 2010, so 2 of them ago. I was one of 2 lay people in the whole United States. There was 48 total people there, which is disgusting with 300 and something million people in this country, and 48 people go to lobby the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee, but that's neither here nor there. I get up there and I tell them pretty explicitly, Jennifer, I said, I did everything the opposite of what you said to do, and I got healthy, and I lost weight, and I feel good, and I have a lot of friends in my sphere of influence that the same thing happened to them. And if you don't figure this out, I'm going to come back here in 5 years from now and point the finger at you and ask you, why? Because diabetes keeps getting worse, obesity keeps getting worse, heart disease is the #1 killer in America of all people. And then we had that crazy virus last year, and the most people that got susceptible to it were the people that were metabolically unhealthy, that all of this dietary advice we've been given led them down that path to being that way. So wow, such an opening when you learned about what saturated fat did in a good way.
Yeah, it was fascinating. And just on that point, I think we're missing a huge opportunity in this country and around the world to talk about metabolic health related to COVID. I mean, really, couldn't we just say, hey, another great way to combat this virus is to improve your metabolic health? But it doesn't seem to be. I mean, it's coming out, at lower levels, but not from the top.
But it's coming from influencers like me and some of the medical doctors, especially within the alternative health and real food type of communities, keto, or even the vegan. Some of the vegan doctors are even talking that way as well. But you're right. It's not coming from Dr. Fauci on down, and it needs to. And to me, when this first went all down, if you weren't tightening up your diet and you weren't getting, like, I was bumping up my vitamin D levels a little bit in supplementation, just all of these things, why weren't they screaming those things? Because those of us in the know, we know, and we did. Those that didn't know, they're left in the dark, washing their hands, socially distancing, wearing a mask and thinking, oh, I'm healthy. And now take the jab in the arm. Oh, I'm healthy because of those things. And they don't realize there's other things you could be doing and should be doing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, that was one of the reasons I wanted to make the film is, once I learned this information, I kind of had my own personal confirmation in my own body. And then at the same time started reading, reading Nina's book, Nina Teichel's book, Gary Taubes' books, and
Yeah.
spreading out to Jason Fung, and just all these people, and looking at this information and thinking, wow, I had seen documentaries that had touched on this information, but not one that had sort of comprehensively wrapped it all up and into a single piece. And so I thought we could do a film about it. And so I started reaching out to the people who are in the film, and amazingly and wonderfully, they all said yes to interview for the film. And so we just started chipping away at it. It took us about 2.5 years to produce the film, but yeah, got it together. And one of the big driving forces for me was the type 2 diabetes community.
Yes.
And they have been told, the dietary guidelines are one thing. Yes, I do feel like there needs to be a low carb option in the dietary guidelines. But then also the American Diabetes Association been telling people with type 2 diabetes that they need to eat carbohydrates, consistent carbohydrates throughout the day, healthy whole grains.
Yeah.
They've just been given bad advice.
Well, thankfully that has changed. Circa a year and a half ago, they have a new president at the ADA, and she is a low carb type 2 diabetic. And so she came in and she's like, guys, carbohydrate restriction is the key to controlling this disease. It's literally, type 2 diabetes is literally a disease of carbohydrate intolerance. So let's tell people, all right, you want to keep doing the diabetes diet and shoot your insulin and all the meds. That's one way. Or give them the option, like you said in the dietary guidelines, to do low carb. So at least good things are happening on that front. Yes. But then the American Heart Association, still hopelessly fat phobic. They are one of the biggest promoters of fat fiction.
The Heart Association?
Yeah.
Yeah, of the fat fiction, not of our film. Yeah, they are.
I was doing a play words.
Perpetuating the fat fiction. Yeah, yes, yeah, for sure. They still are. And yeah, it was wonderful to see the American Diabetes Association come out with that recommendation, that very low carbohydrate diets actually do work. And that happened right as we were finishing editing the film. And so we were able to get it into the very end of the film. Good. They just released that, but gosh, it's just so recent. All these years, these people have been told the wrong thing.
And then Diabetes Canada last year followed suit. So they now have a low carb option in their diabetes education as well. I think slowly but surely the message is getting out. And I've been at this game a long time, 17 years I've been in this space. And when I started, it was like a desert. It was just nothing. It was just low carb bad, meat bad, fat gonna clog your arteries bad. And now we go, okay, there's healthy fats. Okay. You could probably incorporate meat within the balanced diet. You still have the negative organizations and people out there, but for the most part, it's softened a lot. And I think Nina Teichel's book definitely had a big role in that. Obviously, Gary Taubes' book. A lot of people putting this positive message. When Mark Hyman wrote a book about fat being healthy, I think that was a game changer.
Yeah. Mark has been a big influence in this whole discussion and continues to be. And is diving even deeper into the connections to soil health, and his latest book really takes a comprehensive look at not just nutrition, but how can we do this as a society in a way that's good for the planet, good for people. And I think he's doing fabulous work in the space. So it's great. It's good. There's these pioneers out there that continue to push, you included in that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. One of the pioneers that I first reached out to when I came online is in your film, Dr. Johnny Bowden. Yes. Very big and so well spoken. I love Johnny. He sounds like Casey Kasem to me, if you remember the 1980s. Yeah. 40. He sounds just like Casey Kasem. And I remember 1 month into blogging, he sent me an autographed copy of his book, Living the Low Carb Life. And I was like, whoa, an author reached out to me and autographed his book. And he was like, I love the work you're doing with Living La Vida Low Carb. Keep it up. And I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. And now I'm an author that sends people books with my autograph, and it's kind of fun to see this full circle. But you
Yeah.
got some heavy names in this film. Johnny, definitely one of them. Mark Hyman. Talk about some of the other people in there.
Yeah, Johnny was fantastic. He actually came into our community. He flew into town for us and interviewed with us in our community just to keep the cost down. I mean, we were on a we did this all independently because we couldn't take any food industry or pharmaceutical funding or anything like that. We didn't want to have any appearance of, influence on the film. And so he came into town and spent a whole day with us, and he's fantastic. I mean, he's such a vibrant, spark, and he was a great interview, and I think he adds tremendously to the film. And
I love him. He's older than my mom and dad, but he's more energetic. Like, it's night and day looking at my mom and dad and looking at Johnny Bowden and going, they can't possibly be around the same age, and they are. It's the power of real food, the power of eating food to your needs with the hormones and everything. Yeah, Johnny, awesome.
Yeah, and his book, The Great Cholesterol Myth, was also a great source of information for me as I was researching for the film, too. Yeah, and then we had Professor Tim Noakes from South Africa who interviewed with us and, told us his amazing story of, he was kind of the king of carb loading for athletes, and he'd written the book on running, and it was really interesting to hear his transformation and, again, his own personal health journey.
And how he nutrition pages
tearing out the pages, of the book. Because for those who haven't seen the film, the whole first chapter of his book was about carb loading and how athletes needed to, consume a lot of carbohydrates before their races. And then he was doing this for many years. And then he became diabetic, type 2 diabetic himself. And he finally figured out it was the carbohydrates. And so he's kind of famously torn out the whole first chapter of his book, the pages out. And I think he's in the process of rewriting that. But yeah, he's done a complete flip.
And you want to talk about somebody that's enthusiastic and infectious. When you're around Tim Noakes, I got to go speak on a stage with a lot of the people in your film back in 2015. Tim brought in a bunch of us to Cape Town, South Africa, and we spoke on a stage and did this big conference, a huge auditorium, like all these medical health professionals getting CME credits. And I'm just like, like literally when I got off the plane, I got in a cab. Oh, what you here for? And I said, well, if you heard of this guy, Tim Noakes? He's like, that's like asking in a church if anybody knows Jesus. Everybody knows. Like,
he's so highly regarded. He's done so much good in South Africa and around the world too. And he's just a gem of a guy. Yeah, he was really fun to meet and fun to interview. So.
And run through the ringer because of those beliefs around what they call keto banting. But yeah, he had a really tough time, but he won. That was the fun part. And did you put the film that he was able to overcome those things, or?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we talked about him winning the trial at the end of the film, and Zoe Harcombe and Nina Teichels both testified in his trial. Yes. And it was interesting. I've seen a little bit of footage about that trial, and one of the funny things that was said was that the Tim Noakes side of the table, it was apparently like this big U-shaped table with, the dietetics, folks on one side. They were all accusing him of medical malpractice, and then there was Tim Noakes' defense team on the other side, and apparently, Tim Noakes' defense team were all, super fit, low carb folks that were really alert and on their game and knew all their stuff. And the other side of the table, after lunch, people were kind of nodding off and falling asleep and having a hard time because of all the carbohydrates that they were eating. So I thought that was a pretty interesting story just about.
It's quite Well, that's for sure. And you mentioned Zoe Harcum. Talk about a firecracker. She's over in Europe as well. Talk about her.
Yeah, Zoe's so great. She's fantastic. She also has just been really supportive of the film and helpful to me just with research and information. And you know, she's an obesity researcher who went back and looked at, you know, basically all the scientific evidence that was available leading up to the initial dietary guidelines. And basically her research found that there wasn't evidence to prove that a so-called low-fat diet was heart healthy. And so even at the time that the dietary guidelines were first established, there wasn't the science to back it up. So her research is fascinating, and she's an incredibly meticulous, you know, mathematician and researcher. She's amazing.
And she definitely has the kind of British wit and sarcasm. She'll throw it right back at you. It's really good.
Yeah, yeah, she's fantastic. Yeah.
So, yeah, you've named some big names in there, and
Gary
it's wonderful.
Taubes.
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, Gary Taubes is in the film, and of course, you know, he's done, you know, some of the original work in this space.
Oh,
With his article, "What if it's all been a big fat lie?" Originally being published. When was that? I think 2002.
yeah.
Yeah, 2002.
Because
So
I came 3 years later. My weight loss was in 2004 on the Atkins diet, and then I started blogging 2005, and then I interviewed Gary for the first time on the Live and La Vida Low Carb show in 2007. So yeah, he came a few years before I did.
yeah, and you know, he just added a whole lot about the science. You know, he's a science journalist, and his examination of the, you know, the credibility of the science, and that it just, you know, just was not good science. And you know, the studies weren't, you know, nutrition studies are inherently difficult anyway, right? Because
Yeah,
it's really difficult to control every bite of food that
right.
hugely expensive. You really need to put people in a camp and where they
Yes.
can't get out, and it's really difficult to do it that way. And you know, he really illuminated that the way the studies have been done over the years lack credibility.
Yeah, Gary has long said that in order to prove the efficacy of a low carb ketogenic diet, we really need to lock away a few hundred people in a metabolic ward for 1 to 2 years. That's going to cost $500 million to pay for. And so there's no interest by the NIH to fund such a study. And then independently, there's not enough wealthy people that can be benefactors to present that kind of money. So, and there has been attempts at it. Gary actually started the Nutrition Science Initiative to try to do that, and he did get some billionaires that did, you know, offer up. But then he made a huge mistake when he asked people that didn't believe in keto to study keto. And so he got all of these researchers and he gave them the money thinking they would take it in good faith and do the good research. And they didn't. People like Kevin Hall and other ones. And so, yeah, over the years, frustrated by the, well, you don't have enough science. And then when we try to do the science, it's not funded, it's not properly done. And so then we're spinning.
Yeah, and that's a big part of the story too, is how if anyone in opposition to a low-fat, you know, type of diet just couldn't get funding, couldn't get studies done, for years and years.
Which is why people like Eric Westman and Jeff Folek and Steve Finney, like doing these and putting them in journals. If they couldn't get into the Journal of the American Medical Association or the American Clinical Society of Clinical Nutrition, like all of these big journals, they would publish it in like the Nutrition and Metabolism Journal. They actually created a journal so they could at least have an outlet to put this research. And there's a plethora of research just waiting to be done. And I will say this, if you go look up clinicaltrials.org right now, there's a lot more research out there now.
Yes.
And because of people like Gary Taubes and some of those early researchers like Westman did the first study on low carb ketogenic, like in the late 90s. The first like of the modern research movement with keto. He did the first one when he went and visited Atkins. And so now we have a thirst and a hunger to learn more. Now we're learning about the brain health benefits and the heart protective benefits, and the stigma behind it, I think, is gone. And now the researchers are like, all right, we want to look at the mechanisms.
Yeah, Eric Westman's an amazing guy too, and he also is in Fat Fiction, and you know, was incredibly generous with his time too. And I have to say that his new book, End Your Low Carb Confusion, is his new book. I sent it to my parents because I've I've been trying to. There you go, yay! Yep, end your carb. I'm sorry, I said low carb. Yeah, end your carb confusion. Yeah, I sent it to my parents, and my parents are it's been helping them, so that's good.
And then Gary also, since we're bragging on people's
yes.
So I recently
Great
interviewed.
book.
Yeah, I recently interviewed him on La Vida, and yeah, we were just like two old low carb OGs just shooting the breeze and talking about how far the message has come, because there were some dark days. And you know, thanks to films like yours, like previous to your documentary, 2009, there was Fathead, my friend Tom Naughton made. Did you ever watch Fathead?
Yeah.
Yeah, for an amateur filmmaker, because he's a stand-up comic.
Right.
He figured out how to do the filmmaking. Of course, he's a comedian, so he made it funny, and that gets engagement into a documentary. Your documentary isn't funny, but it's engaging. It like draws you in, because you just go scene to scene to scene, expert to expert to expert, and then facts, and people go, whoa. Like there's different styles of documentary making, and yours is very much that nonfiction. Let's get them with the appeal to authority, and let's get them with the facts. And that's what you did in your film very, very well. Unlike Tom, who is good on the facts, but he purposely makes it funny. There's different folks.
I don't think there can be too many voices, you know, getting this message out there, you know, so I don't have any competitive feelings toward other filmmakers who are doing the same topic. So, but I will say with Fat Fiction, we worked really hard on the script to make it accessible to a general audience. And so there was a lot of time and attention paid with the script to really break it down and make it understandable for, you know, an audience like, for example, my mom and dad, you know, who have been told all their lives that saturated fat is the enemy, and what a surprise that actually sugar and carbs may be the enemy, and saturated fat may not be nearly as bad as we were told.
And I'm glad you said that, Jennifer, because I think sometimes, and especially I try to resist it myself, because that's been my brand. Take that complex, make it applicable to the everyman so they can understand it. It's one reason I wrote Keto Clarity like I did, because I wanted it to be very I wanted it to feel like I was a friend as they were reading it. And I write very much the same way I talk. And so feel like my mom even told me, I felt like you were talking to me when I was reading your book. I'm like, thank you, Mom. That's what I was going for.
That's great.
And it's the same thing with a documentary. You can put the sciencey stuff and talk about gluconeogenesis and talk about beta hydroxybutyrate, and you could throw in these, you know, highfalutin words, but if you don't tell them what it means to them, it's just the Peanuts teacher. So yeah, you did that very well in your film, and you had translators with your guests that were in the film. They were able to translate, especially people like Johnny, who know how to take this message, hone it into everyday language.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I just feel like we had the A-list folks in the low carb community that were so generous with their time to help break this down for us. And Johnny was definitely one of those. Nina was fantastic. You know, Sarah Hallberg, whose research is, you know, breaking new ground every day, was amazing and gave such a good interview as well. So we were really lucky.
And she's from Virta Health. People that haven't heard of VIRTA, go look them up. But a lot of the studies that have come out I remember visiting her in Indiana. Did you go to Indiana to visit her and do the filming? Or
No, we interviewed her in Ohio. We
oh
went to a low carb conference in Ohio.
boy,
Yeah, yeah,
yes. That's where she's based in, is Indiana. She had me come speak, and she had like hundreds of patients and other practitioners in the audience, and I'm going, who is this lady? And then she's like, I'm going to make sure studies get out there. We need the studies. We need the research. She's a
yeah.
fireball. And then she had
She
this
is a fireball.
of
Yeah.
cancer last year, and she's hopefully recovering from that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's definitely one of the firebrands that are out there. This is what I love about the community, and how I've seen it evolve over the years. Just when you think the old guard is kind of like getting tired of talking about the message, along comes like fresh blood that then like
Yeah.
be with more excitement again. And it's fun. People like her, and even now you coming into the community, offering up fat fiction as yet another case for keto, to use Gary's words, because this message is not going to die. It's not going to be irrelevant 5 years from now. The fiction about fat has happened for so long, it's going to take years, if not decades, to unravel the fiction.
Yeah, well, there's major institutions that, are embarrassed that they got this story wrong, or they don't want to admit that they
Right.
got the story wrong. So that's a big obstacle. You got a group like the American Heart Association still not wanting to back down from their decades of bad advice, basically. That's tough.
They're fearful. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I think they're fearful of class action lawsuits, because if you tell people cut your fat, cut your fat, cut your fat, cut your fat so often that now it becomes a default, and then they get diseases related to a lack of fat in your diet, which is a bunch of them. Because usually when you cut fat, what do you replace it with? Carbohydrate. But see,
Right.
they'll say, well, people had the individual choice, but they were heavily influenced by that messaging of low fat, low fat, low fat, low fat, because fat's
Right.
going to clog your arteries. Never have any study ever shown fat's going to clog your arteries. But the message is out there so profoundly, people obediently cut their fat. Even people that start keto, they'll cut their carbs, but they're like, well, we know cutting fat's healthy, so let's do both. And then they don't do well, and they're like, well, keto sucks, I'm going to move on to the next thing. And they
Yeah.
never really do it the right way.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the patient that we followed, she has type 2 diabetes, and we follow a patient in the film, and she really struggled with that, being over the years. She was told at times to cut carbohydrates, but she was also told that she had to cut fat at the same time.
Yes.
And so she said it just pushed her into eating rabbit food, is what she called it. She said, I just couldn't sustain my body on that. And I would, she just couldn't sustain it. And so then she came around to a ketogenic lifestyle, and has really liked it.
And
Yeah.
not just food, but rabbit, because that's pretty lean meat. So
Yeah. Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
But
Put some butter on that rabbit.
yeah, exactly. Slaughter that butter all over that rabbit. Yes. So yeah, I can't eat lean meats. I get hungry just thinking about eating lean meats. It's why I think natural fats that come with the meat, like, our ancestors didn't just cut off all the fat. They knew instinctively, Jennifer, that that's where the nutrition is. That's where the caloric density, but even beyond the calories, the micronutrition was, especially when they got into some of the organs like the brain and the heart and all the things.
Yeah, I know. And now I can feel it. I didn't feel it before when I was eating all these wrong foods, but now that I've, fine-tuned my nutrition a little better, I can really feel how nutritious that fat is too. And,
Yeah.
one of my favorite meals has become ribeye steaks. Those are so delicious. We don't buy them all the time because they're pretty expensive, but we look for them on sale, and boy, those are delicious.
Although you and I are both heavy into a fast, we should probably stop talking about food right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's funny.
Well, being around food hasn't been too bad, but yeah, I'm probably feeling the most lightheaded, and maybe the weakest I've felt so far this morning.
We're both keeping our energy up pretty good though for this interview. So good job.
Yeah.
Because I'm also spacey floaty right now. So
Yeah.
we're both pros. You don't even notice it if you're watching or listening right now. We're both pros at this. So
Yeah.
do you get in front of the camera at all, or are you all behind the camera?
I've done a little bit in front of the camera, but mostly I'm behind the camera. Yeah, mostly I'm a writer, director, producer. So yeah, I've made most of my career behind the camera.
Yeah. I mean, you're doing a great job, and I definitely think there is opportunity. I know you want to do some future films on longevity and some of the research about that, which again is tied to keto and eating fat and cutting carbs. It's still all that's still relevant. But man, like you're ripe with this film to do like Fat Fiction 2 and have like another subtitle. There's so many directions you could take with this.
Yeah, we
Are there
talked about that. We talked about doing a part 2 because one of the biggest criticisms that I see in the reviews, like on Amazon, of our film, is that we're just a meat, animal farming propaganda film, and that we're just all meat, and that we are down on vegetables. And I was like, no. I mean, did you see the meals that people were eating in the film?
They don't.
And so I have felt, well, maybe we need to do a follow-up and talk about like tips and tricks that people that we interviewed in the film utilize in their own daily lives, just kind of more practical advice. I don't know.
It's almost you don't need to do that. It's what I'm going to try to say. I think maybe for that purpose, you could call it a fact fiction book, and then put those things in a book form. No, a documentary kind of, and this is just Jimmy giving you unsolicited business advice. I think if you're going to do a film, definitely have something that would be the focus. Like this one was obviously putting the focus on fat, why it's not unhealthy, why you should be eating it in your diet in conjunction with a carbohydrate restricted diet. You had all the experts, I think there needs to be some topic, whether it could be fasting, like right now you're fasting, you're feeling the benefits of it. That could be interesting, although there have been other films and series about it. But that shouldn't stop you if you think you have something to say.
Yeah, no, I think I'm more interested right now in the mental health piece.
Yes.
And yeah, it just seems to be a lot of interesting things going on right now, in particular in relation to Alzheimer's and the treatment. Yes, also known as type 3 diabetes. And it seems like a logical extension of Fat Fiction and the mental health benefits that can be achieved through nutrition and other things. It's not just nutrition, but there's there've been some, I don't know, some 500 Alzheimer's trials by pharmaceutical companies trying to find the magic bullet medication, and it's just not happening. That they're not finding it, and to the point where one of the major pharmaceutical companies, I think it was Johnson & Johnson, announced they're not even going to try anymore. They've dropped all trials for Alzheimer's drugs.
Well, they're trying to, and this always kills me in these pharmaceutical, or even some of the ones that look at nutrition, they always go, well, we see that this 90% fat ketogenic diet provides benefit for Alzheimer's and Parkinson, and they come to the conclusion, yeah, the diet really worked well to help with the neurodegenerative. So we need to have more research to find a prescription to make out of this mechanism. And I'm like, why the prescription? Why not just tell them eat that diet?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So that's a space we've kind of been doing a little preliminary research and kind of looking at. So we'll see.
And there's a lot of people, from Dr. David Perlmutter, Dr. Mary Newport. I mean, there's so many people in even just my sphere of influence. You probably even know more beyond what I know, that would definitely contribute to like a Fat Fiction 2 with a focus on brain health, mental health. I'm getting excited for that one, but
okay.
guys, go watch Fat Fiction. It's currently available. Go check out Wide Eye TV over on Instagram, and that way you can see all the links. She's got a nice little link tree there that has all the links to where you can find it. But go look it up if you haven't seen it yet. Fabulous film. Congratulations. Good job. I love people that get passionate about a project and then take that passion and run with it with your skill set. And obviously you're a very good filmmaker. You stayed in your lane, you did it well, and you should be very proud.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Jimmy. I really appreciate it. Appreciate you having me on today, and appreciate all the support on Clubhouse too. It's been really a neat little app to get involved with and get involved with the keto community there. So thank you.
Yeah, guys, get on Clubhouse if you can. Jennifer and I hang out there a lot, and one of these days they'll open it up to Android and everybody. Yeah. Until then, just I guess they'll have FOMO until then. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Jimmy.